Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of a special partnership with Alaska Public Media. Thank you for joining us this Sunday evening, March 13th, 2022. And if you'd like to pass along any interesting reports or images you may have, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can always go to weather.gov/Alaska. Well, the big weather news, you remember to set your clock ahead 1 hour, spring ahead 1 hour. That time change occurred last night, early this morning. We have a geomagnetic storm underway. The solar disturbance, a coronal mass ejection, arrived late last night, early this morning, triggering a G2 class geomagnetic storm. There were active bright auroras visible across a good chunk of Alaska, including Nome, as well as down to Anchorage early this morning. And we anticipate the potential for some more active and bright auroras this evening. Sunset time, though, is going to be later. Won't be really getting dark because of the time change now until around 9:30 at night. I mean, good and dark, like astronomical, past astronomical twilight. And that's going to allow for, at least if this particular geomagnetic storm continues, for you to see more. I'll have a lot of details coming up here in just a moment. Turning colder, though, and drier across northern and western side of the state, the mainland, as we go through this weekend and next weekend. We are going to see some snow changing to rain, work its way across the panhandle later Monday and into Tuesday with a gale force front that'll be lifting northward and northeastward across that area. Overall, though, this colder, drier pattern in the north and west should persist into early next week, March 19th to the 23rd, and we'll show the extended 6 to 10 day outlook coming up here at the end of this particular segment. But with the push of colder air coming down from the north, we anticipate a wind chill advisory for the eastern half of the North Slope for late Monday evening into early Tuesday afternoon. There could be some wind chills down around 50 below or so. The rest of the state, though, southwide, at least for now, we don't anticipate any advisories or warnings. The snow and wind there that's going to impact the Panhandle and Northern Gulf Coast should remain below advisory criteria. And looking across the state today, we're going to go way up to the north, Barrow, Utqiagvik, high clouds, temperature of 1 below this afternoon. And as we come a little further south through the southwest interior, Bethel has clear skies, though breezy conditions. Bethel has seen some gusts this Tuesday, I should say this Sunday afternoon, up around 40 miles an hour with a temperature at 7 above. And then as we round down to the south central coast area, just there, Thompson Pass, windy, has had some wind gusts 50 to near 60 miles an hour this afternoon with a temperature of only 9 above. And then finally, way in the south end of the Panhandle, Ketchikan comes in with cloudy skies this Sunday afternoon with a mid-afternoon temperature of 43 degrees, but rain is on the way. Well, this is the scene early this morning. Very late last night, that coronal mass ejection arrived, and that triggered an enhancement to the northern lights. John Dean up at Nome captured this image. The display took off after 2-3 a.m. and persisted right on up into sunrise. And then we can also see from satellite image, this is a polar orbiting satellite image where you see the areas of yellow enhanced running across from Norton Sound down through southern Alaska, right in the vicinity of Anchorage. That is the satellite capturing the ionization there associated with the northern lights. So this was a pretty good display, and we could see that display continuing in tonight as long as this disturbance doesn't tend to wane. And the information as of this afternoon, we have a planetary K index. This is kind of a measure of the disturbance of the magnetic field. Is high as a 6, and that generally will produce some very good auroras even down in through the Anchorage area when we have that kind of setup. So if that does persist into the darker hours here, as once after sunset, once later evening falls, we'll be able to see more bright northern lights here across even southern Alaska. And you can see on the right side of your screen, the aurora oval is enhanced, and this was as of 2:30 this afternoon while I'm just shortly before I made this recording. You'll see the brighter enhanced orange-red areas where there is a very strong likelihood of more active aurora going on, and that will rotate as the Earth rotates. That could be up over Alaska here as we get into the later evening and overnight hours. And let's look at what we got for cloud cover. The interior has enjoyed some very sunny skies. The clouds, though, unfortunately hug there the Kenai up through Prince William Sound, up into the southeast and down across the Panhandle, including Kodiak Island. So you guys are going to be socked in the clouds, but once you get from around Anchorage northward, there's going to be a better chance of clear skies, so you'll have at least a shot at seeing an enhanced aurora display. And if you look off to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the counterclockwise circulation associated with low pressure that's going to be lifting from the northern Pacific, heading northeastward up to the central Panhandle coast as we get into Tuesday. High pressure remains entrenched overnight early on Monday from the Yukon westward into central Canada. A backdoor cold front's going to be dropping south and westward along the west side of the state here as we go through the next couple of days, and that's going to enhance the colder air that drops in across the region here as we go through the week into next weekend. And behind that front, there could be some snow showers or lighter flurries and gusty winds, especially along the west coast, where there could also be some blowing and drifting snow as the result of the winds that pick up around that front. Low pressure on Monday afternoon will still be to the south, kind of between the North Pacific, South Central Gulf interface, and then by Tuesday it'll be lifting northeastward, and that's going to keep troughiness across the Panhandle, along with rain, especially inner and outer channels, snow in the inner coastal mountains and the far north up there towards Skagway and Haines. It'll take a little longer for that precipitation to change over as weak high pressure dominates there along the north slope into the Canadian Arctic coast. There'll be another low south of the Alaska Peninsula, and that may bring some precipitation up into along the Gulf Coast here as we head toward midweek. Otherwise, colder temperatures are going to be settling in to the eastern interior and across the north. That's going to spill south and westward. High temperatures, though, Monday afternoon are still going to make the 40s, portions of the Panhandle and, say, Kodiak Island. Otherwise, note cooling trend as we get down as we go through the week. Colder air is going to begin to advance southwestward here as we go through Tuesday morning. Lows teens, 20s to near 30 below there across much of the central, northern, eastern interior. And afternoon highs are going to be below freezing, again for areas like Anchorage that have had temperatures above freezing for a while. And we're going to see the 40s mainly confined now to the Panhandle as we go into the middle part of the week. And here we're looking at morning lows on Monday morning. Below freezing there, the north end of the Panhandle at Haines and Skagway, but say upper 30s, outer areas, Metlakatla on over toward Craig, Sitka, and then also staying above freezing at Kodiak. But notice temperatures tomorrow will be a bit cooler, even with some sunshine, say at Anchorage, 29 for a high or so. Coastal areas still, though, generally in the mid-30s with some lower mid-40s there along the southern and western outer areas of the Panhandle. Tuesday morning lows below zero, though, as you get up toward Glen Allen, the Copper River Basin, and along and west of the Alaska Range, as that colder air is going to spill southwestward along the west side of the Alaska Range. And Tuesday highs will stay below freezing across much of south central, with readings in the lower and mid-40s expected across much of the Panhandle. As we go take a look at the north lows tonight, generally widespread below zeros, teens below, 20s below. There could be some isolated 30 below readings. And then Monday afternoon, we expect breezy conditions there along the Brooks Range, the west side of the state, west coast. Temperatures staying below zero in North Slope and along the Arctic coast. Temperatures falling, the Yukon River Valley. And then Tuesday morning lows, we'll see some 20s, even isolated 30s below. And the colder temperatures will be entrenched there, and that's the general trend we're going to expect here going through the bulk of this week. Daytime highs, even along the Yukon River, get back down near or just above zero. And as we extend out along the Alaska Peninsula, we'll start to see some readings by Monday morning, getting back down below zero, Aniak on up toward McGrath. Still, though, near or above freezing as you run down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula into the eastern central Aleutians. Afternoon highs Monday slip into the teens there across the middle portion of the Yukon Valley down into the southwest interior. And then Tuesday morning lows, we start to see more readings below zero there across the southwest interior as you run up the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers. And Tuesday afternoon highs will generally be in the single digits and teens in the southwest, but as you trail out across the Alaska Peninsula, still some temperatures getting back up around or above freezing, especially as you trail out and get further south and west into the Aleutian chain. The extended forecast, the 6 to 10 day outlook for March 19th through the 23rd, which takes us through later next weekend and into early next week. We are looking for temperatures to average below normal across much of the state, centered still on the southwest around Dillingham, Bethel area. And precipitation in this kind of pattern is going to keep the west and northern areas of the state generally on a drier pattern, whereas on the east side, precipitation could end up being a bit above normal, especially the southeast interior along the Alcan border and extending southeastward across the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, let's take a look now at the aviation weather and to start your week. Monday into Tuesday, if you have a flight planned, the main weather player will be an area of low pressure lifting out of the lower central Gulf up toward the Panhandle coast, and with it, it's going to bring some more rain and snow. You can see the IFR conditions that'll extend there over the southern Panhandle. Could even be a rumble of thunder there. And extending westward out to just north of the central Aleutians, back through the western Aleutians, IFR conditions. Also, there's going to be a cold front backdooring in across the north, sliding across the west side of the state. That's going to bring in some colder air as we go through the week. Meanwhile, high pressure that's centered over northwest Canada is going to tend to develop a little more east-southeastward into central Canada, but overall, fairly dry conditions anticipated, at least for the mainland. Best chance of precipitation will be along the Gulf Coast, especially northern Gulf Coast into portions of the Panhandle. Monday afternoon, look for those IFR conditions along and off of the Panhandle coast, as well as up along the Arctic coast and North Slope. In the wake of that cold front, there's going to be some light snow and colder temperatures, breezy conditions, also IFR conditions extending back to the western Aleutians. And for Tuesday morning, we expect IFR conditions there along the Arctic coast, the North Slope, trying to slip southward of the Brooks Range, and then widespread IFR conditions are anticipated throughout the Panhandle, westward, back through Yakutat. And then as we go to Tuesday afternoon, we'll see widespread IFR conditions around Yakutat down through the Panhandle, as well as along the northwest Arctic coast and down there toward the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. And pass conditions on Monday, Anaktuvik Pass will see VFR conditions becoming MVFR. Some of that moisture and colder air filters in from the north and northeast. Adigan Pass, the same thing, VFR becoming MVFR. Lake Clark and Merrill should enjoy a VFR day on Monday as we round the west side of the Alaska Range into the central Alaska Range, rainy on over into Windy Pass. And then finally heading eastward, Isabel and Mentasta passes all along the Alaska Range. We expect VFR conditions on Monday. And a little further south and west, Tenedo should also see VFR conditions on Monday, as will Portage Pass. And then as we get into the northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White should see MVFR conditions on Monday with a trend toward IFR conditions, certainly by the time we get into later Monday night and by Tuesday. And looking at freezing levels do bump up a bit to 2,000 feet there, south end of the Panhandle. Otherwise, the surface freezing line runs along the outer Panhandle coast, northern Gulf, through Kodiak Island, and then across the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, out across the lower Bering. And the greatest threat of any icing will be out over the Gulf. There'll be some isolated pockets of moderate icing between 3,000 and 12,000 feet. And also back out through portions of the central Aleutians, lower Bering, a few isolated areas of moderate icing, 2,000 to 10,000 feet. And looking at the upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet, the strongest core of winds is from the southwest coming across Vancouver into British Columbia and central Canada. We see a 135 knot jet max core that's going up there. Meanwhile, it's a hint of a upper level circulation there in the low side of the lower Gulf. And then as we go back up across the northern parts of the state, we see the Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait winds out of the north-northwest, 60 to 65 knots there at 30,000 feet, bringing it down to mid-levels. We see the low out over the lower Gulf, North Pacific interface. That's causing southwest flow coming in around Haida and up into the Panhandle in about 40 to 45 knots. And then back across the northwest portion of the state from the Arctic coast down through say Kotzebue Sound and the Seward Peninsula, winds will be out of the north, generally 35 to 45 knots. And then as we bring it further down to 3,000 foot level, we have high pressure out over northwest Canada, low pressure there, the lower Gulf North Pacific interface with there along Haida Gwaii in the coast there of the southwest portion of the Panhandle. Winds from the southwest, 45 upwards to 50 knots offshore. And then also we see those winds coming down along the west side of the state, Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait, out of the north-northeast around 45 knots. And as we look at where the greatest threat of any turbulence will be, we'll see the potential for some turbulence along the southern portion of the Panhandle, surface to 5,000 feet, and then across areas of the northwest, western portion of the Brooks Range and Seward Peninsula, look for the potential for some turbulence between the surface and 4,000 feet. So have a safe flight if you're able to get out.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from Gina and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by EPSCoR to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and Gina's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that that would be easier to travel with, you know, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state. Which
you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy. And it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these two-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains, where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math, in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like flypaper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out, and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's start with the ice edge as it looked back on March 9th. Let's see, that's about 4 days ago, and if we take a look at where things had advanced now, we can see Polinia's area is opening up there through Norton Sound with the persistent northeasterly winds. We see that openings there on the southwest facing side of St. Lawrence Island as well as Nunavik Island. So there you have it. We do anticipate winds to continue with a more of a northwesterly component as we go through early in the coming week. So the ice is still going to have a tendency to want to push a bit south and a little westward. Looking at the southeast panhandle for Monday, we have a gale force front that's going to try and work its way inland there by certainly Tuesday. At least the central northern channels are going to see 25 to 30 knot north winds. The outer coast will have winds 30 to as high as 35 knots. Waves could exceed 20 feet south of Sitka, west of Craig. And then on Tuesday, the winds do come down with the inner channels generally from the north there, Lynn Canal 15 knots, but south-southeast winds 20 to 25 knots, Petersburg down toward Ketchikan and Metlakatla. And then on the outer coast, strongest winds there just southwest of Craig at 25 knots, waves about 16 feet, and winds more southeasterly Sitka toward Yakutat 15 to 20 knots. Across the northwest Gulf, winds will be out of the northeast 20 to 25 knots, more of a northerly 20-knot wind there, Prince William Sound, and then northeast to north winds 25 knots through lower Cook Inlet. And by Tuesday, winds are going to certainly come down a bit there, upper portions of Cook Inlet to Prince William Sound, northerly winds 15 knots. And generally west-northwest winds 20 to 25 knots off the Kenai coast. But for the mouth of Cook Inlet, northwesterly winds 30 knots with 8-foot waves. On Monday, throughout Kodiak Island on the Gulf and North Pacific side, winds will generally be northeast to north 20 to 25 knots. On the Bering side, look at Bristol Bay, northeast winds 20 knots, waves maybe 4 feet or so. And then for Tuesday, Winds will be west-southwest around Kodiak Island around 20 knots, but more northerly on the Pacific side as we extend down the length of the Alaska Peninsula, and northeast to north at 20 to as high as 30 knots there north of Cold Bay, with some 11-foot waves for Tuesday afternoon. On Monday, the Aleutians will see an area of low pressure just south of them, not a very strong one, but winds will be out of the east to northeast through the central and eastern Aleutians around 15 to 20 knots. Waves generally 5 to 7 feet, not a big deal for the Aleutians. And then for Tuesday, winds will be a little more, there'll be a little more oomph to them, 25, 30 knots across the eastern Aleutians with waves of maybe 10 to 12 feet. They'll become more northeasterly to 20 knots west of Adak with 8 or 9 footers. And then across the west coast, winds will be out of the northeast at 20 to 30 knots, so the ice is still going to want to press a bit southward, maybe a tad westward. And then on Tuesday, expect more north to northwest winds, around 25 knots there over the ice. So again, the ice is still going to want to maybe shift a little bit southward. But otherwise, we see plenty of colder air settling back into the west side of the state and up through the north. So ice maintenance will continue across the Bering Strait, Chukchi Sea, and Arctic coast. Winds will generally be out of the northwest and north 15 to 20 knots on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we do anticipate winds to be west to northwest along the Arctic coast, but north to northwest there through the lower Chukchi Sea, passing through the Bering Strait and accelerating to about 25 knots through the strait to the north side of St. Lawrence Island. So late tonight into early Monday morning, there will be a weak backdoor cold front kind of sit up there along the north slope. That's going to begin to press south and westward and reinforce or bring some colder air during the week to the west side of the state. High pressure over the Yukon, northwest Canada will begin to kind of weaken and push a little eastward with that low coming up from the North Pacific into the Gulf and impacting the Panhandle with snow changing to rain. Gale force front will tend to weaken by the time we get into Tuesday. But Monday afternoon we still see areas of rain, especially along the outer southern portion of the Panhandle with snow further inland and the cold front pressing south through the southwestern mainland. And then the low weakens along the north-central Gulf Coast with troughiness there along the Panhandle. The colder air will make it all the way clearing the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, with another low well south of the Alaska Peninsula, potentially bringing some additional precipitation to areas of the Gulf and South Central as we head into midweek.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.